I'm Sarah Fensky, and this is the 314. Every episode, we sit down with St. Louisans who know what makes this place tick. Together, we explore why things are the way they are and how we can make them better. This episode of the 314 podcast is sponsored by Royal Banks of Missouri. The brand new president and CEO of Explore St. Louis made his name selling Myrtle Beach and Puerto Rico as destinations for conventions and tourism. His job duties in St. Louis will be similar, even though the location is anything but. We don't have beaches. We don't have balmy winter weather. But Brad Dean knows exactly what he's getting into. He joined me last week, his very first one on the job, to share why he chose St. Louis over jobs in New York, San Francisco, and Chicago. He also shared his own memories of visiting St. Louis as a boy and discussed how Explore St. Louis can play to the city's strength and help us address our weaknesses. Brad Dean, welcome.
Thank you for having me. So great to be here and to be the first and newest resident of St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, you're not kidding when you say you're the newest resident of St. Louis. Like, you've been on the job less than a week at this point.
Like, literally moved here this past weekend during the Mardi Gras Festival and started work this week. So I am just honored and excited to be a part of this great community.
And when you say you moved in during the Mardi Gras Festival, like, you literally moved in during the Mardi Gras
lesson
Festival.
learned this weekend. I had captured a little apartment for a couple nights in Soulard and didn't even think about the fact that we're hosting this massive festival, and I was moving to downtown that weekend. So note to Brad, don't move during Mardi Gras weekend. But I can honestly say it is the largest Mardi Gras parade outside of New Orleans.
It is. Did you get, beer flung on you and beads thrown about your neck as you're trying to move your boxes in and out?
I did, and I had several young 20-somethings who politely alerted me that this was probably not the day to move. So lesson learned.
Yeah. So you can, now as you're there at Explore St. Louis, you can give people like helpful tips like this. Like if you want to stay in Soulard, like make sure you're up for Mardi Gras.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, it is a great festival and people were having a lot of fun. And that was the important thing. So it just reminded me of one of the great benefits of being here is we have awesome festivals all throughout the year.
So you moved here from Puerto Rico. Have you been dealing with any culture shock? That seems like a very different kind of place than St. Louis, especially St. Louis in March.
Yeah, you mean other than the snow and the low double-digit weather, that was probably the biggest adjustment. But, Puerto Rico is a beautiful place. But, hey, Puerto Rico, even with 80 degrees and beautiful beaches, doesn't have emos, doesn't have Ted Drews, and doesn't have Forest Park and an art museum with Van Gogh. So there is so much to love about St. Louis. And I get the honor and privilege of not just enjoying it, but telling the world about that.
So you dropped some important St. Louis touchstones there. It sounds like even though you're very new to this job, you've gotten a little bit of chance to get up to speed. Have you been able to visit prior to this moving in?
Absolutely. In fact, the first vacation that I remember as a young child was coming to St. Louis. And we didn't take a lot of vacations in my family. We grew up in a small farming community in the Midwest, so we weren't going to Disney World every summer. And I still remember as a young child coming to St. Louis and standing below that arch and eating at the spaghetti factory and cheering on the Cardinals at Busch Stadium. And for me, St. Louis was a place of magic and potential. And it also planted in me as a young child the power of travel, because travel opened my eyes and opened my mind to the world. So to come here, more than 4 decades later and now have the privilege of promoting St. Louis to the world is really a full circle moment for me. And also, while I was never a competitor to St. Louis, I was always watching what was happening, particularly in recent years with all of the challenges, but also all of the growth and expansion. So truth be told, at the same time I was interviewing for this job, I was also interviewing with some other major cities like New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. I walked away from some great offers and chose St. Louis because I believe the trajectory of progress here is greater than anywhere else I've seen. So I couldn't be more excited to choose St. Louis as not only a great place to live, but also a great place to work and promote.
You talk about that trajectory of progress. So you're not saying this is the one where you can make the big impact because we have the farthest to go. You feel like we're already kind of on a
Absolutely. The sense of momentum from the outside looking in is palpable. I mean, just look at the downtown. And yes, I know the downtown has some challenges and there have been some problems there that we do have to solve. But just look at what's happened with 21C and Union Station. Look at what's happening with the Brick Line and what's taking place on 7th Avenue. And then you throw in the potential of the Millennium Hotel redevelopment. And this is a major game-changing moment. I am convinced that we're going to look back 10, 20 years from now and realize that we were all part of something really, really special. And of course, downtown's important, but there's so much going on all throughout St. Louis City and County. And so there's a lot happening here already. And that was a big part of the reason why I wanted to come here. The entrepreneurial vibe, the investment that's taking place, not only what's happened, but what the potential of St. Louis is as a great, iconic American city that's reemerging in a bit of a renaissance moment.
So before you were in Puerto Rico, you were in Myrtle Beach, and you had a pretty similar job there, maybe the exact same job there?
Pretty much the same job there. Of course, much smaller town with a big economy of 30,000 residents, 20 million visitors. So.
Yeah, I mean, Myrtle Beach is a place everybody loves to visit, right? You think Myrtle Beach, I'm even having images in my head right now of like vacation. That's where I want to go. How does a place like St. Louis trying to lure convention goers, how do we ever compete with something like that seems like such a natural sell?
Yeah, well, you underscored the challenge there is we have to be ourselves. We can't be like everybody else. And part of that means at St. Louis, we have to talk about ourselves a little differently. And so one of the things we have to do is recognize that the meeting goer today, the people that go to meetings and conventions, are looking for a sense of purpose. It's not just about the rates, the dates, and the space at the convention center, but what can I do when I'm there? And I give the younger generation of travelers a lot of credit for this because they don't go to conventions just because somebody else told them to or because they did last year. They want to know, when I come to St. Louis, what else can I do? What else can I experience? And that's where the beauty and the magic of St. Louis really rises to the top, because we have neighborhoods that provide exclusive and very exquisite experiences. We have, museums and attractions that you won't find elsewhere. So I think part of the challenge is selling the Americas Center and the Dome as a great facility to host epic events. But while you're here, there's so much to do around you. And that creates what today is a growing trend, is what we call bleisure. It's the business and the leisure travel combined. And that's creating a bit of an economic explosion in many communities. Part of my job is to make sure that we're tapping into that and making sure that we elevate the brand of St. Louis as not only a great place to meet and a great place to visit, also a great place to live, work, and vacation.
So you talk about bleisure. The idea is maybe you come for a convention, but you tack on a couple extra days to explore?
Yeah, maybe you go to a Cardinals game, or maybe you hit the art museum. Maybe you stroll through Maplewood and see some of the cool, quaint cafes and the vibe here. There's so much to do in St. Louis, and I think our neighborhoods are a real strength for us. We have to elevate that as part of the brand. So why not come here before or after the meeting and convention and enjoy some of what we offer? And not only does that allow us to bring more visitors, it allows us to convince the visitors that are coming to stay longer and spend more. And that's where we get that sort of halo effect, an economic lift that benefits everyone.
I'm interested in what you're saying about the neighborhoods, because to me, that is the number one strength of St. Louis, is we have these wonderful walkable enclaves, some in the city, some places like Maplewood in St. Louis County. And I think of that as a great reason to live here. I've never thought of it as a draw for tourists. People want to find places where just people are living their lives and go to those coffee shops rather than, say, go to Union Station, which has a ton of attractions sort of targeted at people.
Historically, that hasn't been the strategy. In fact, for the first 20 years of my career, tourism in most communities, whether it was Myrtle Beach, Puerto Rico, or St. Louis, was all about your top 10 list. Here's where you can go, you don't want to miss. Here's the most Instagrammable locations. But today, what consumers are saying is, I know you've got the Arch. I've heard about the Hill. I want to see Union Station, but what else is there? And it's not just about the places, it's about the people. So one of the things that we have to do at Explore St. Louis is be really, really good about telling the story of St. Louis, one person, one business, one experience at a time. Now, we've got some secret weapons. Like you say, the neighborhoods are great. We have some extraordinary experiences. We probably have more free attractions than any community outside of Washington, D.C. And I think our superpower is Kat Neville, because she comes from the publishing background. So she's spent a career telling stories. So Kat was perfectly positioned to be able to help lead this effort for us, as well as some great partners like Greater St. Louis Inc. and the St. Louis Sports Commission, who are already doing this work. So yeah, it's a whole new world in travel and tourism, partly because the younger generation of travelers have different expectations, and partly because people think, plan, and purchase travel differently. So part of my role is to make sure that we are cutting edge in terms of our strategies and our tactics, that we can not just follow these trends, that we can help lead and create new trends.
So give me an example of like how you would use a person to help sell people on St. Louis. I mean, I know you're not just the talent of someone like Kat Neville who's working to do that, but the story of a St. Louisan.
Yeah. Well, probably a better example I can give you, since I'm on day 5 of my new job, is how I've done this in the past. But historically, for years, decades, in fact, the island of Puerto Rico promoted itself as a beautiful beach destination. Come here and enjoy the fun and the sun. And that usually lasts for about 2 days. If you get sunburn, maybe a day and a half. What we found was a great success in connecting people with artists and artisans and dancers. We worked with the Loíza community. It was the epicenter of the Afro-American Puerto Rican culture, and used the dancers and the artists that told the story of the African-American community in the Caribbean and how they played a key role in the island's culture and history. That drew people away from the capital city and the beaches into the small little community where they could actually see coffee being harvested as they watched the coffee being pressed and prepared in a cafe. They got to see the art being created and talk to the artist. And so there's a real desire to connect with the people who really define the community. Now, what were the results of that? Well, when I started, we were the least productive tourism destination in the Caribbean. And when I left, we were number 1 in the US and number 2 in the world. I don't take credit for that. All I take credit for is hiring an extraordinary team who connected with the people who helped tell the story of the island. Translate that to St. Louis. You've got an amazing legacy of people who have created history here. In many cases, not well known, and yet we can tell their story, whether it's from music, arts, entertainment, sports, innovation, and business. There are travelers who will travel for that. And let's not overlook the obvious. People will travel across the ocean to see Van Gogh paintings. We have half a dozen right here in our community. So for me, it's about finding those under-recognized, underappreciated stories and people and accentuating the brand of St. Louis through them.
We're talking today to Brad Dean, the president and CEO of Explore St. Louis. This episode is brought to you by Royal Banks of Missouri. For 60 years, Royal Banks of Missouri has proudly served St. Louis by uplifting local businesses and investing in the communities they call home. From mortgages to treasury management, they offer a variety of personalized products and services to fit your personal and business banking needs. Call 314-212-1500 or visit royalbanksofmo.com to discover how they can support you on your financial journey. Royal Banks of Missouri, member FDIC, and equal housing lender. And now back to our conversation with Brad Dean. You're talking about the strength of St. Louis's neighborhood. At the same time, when people come here for a convention, they're there in downtown St. Louis. This is kind of the front door to the region for a lot of visitors. And it's an area that has been a little bit more of a challenge. How much is that on your mind as you're thinking about the convention center and you're thinking about the experience that you want people to have here?
Yeah, it weighs pretty heavy on me. And that was a big consideration in my consideration of whether or not I wanted to come here to lead Explore St. Louis. And I think the last thing we need is leaders that are going to bury their heads in the sand. And so it's not just, it's not helpful for me to just absorb the talking points and ignore the problems. And let's be honest, we have some problems in downtown. Now, I will tell you, having visited here about a dozen times over the last 2 years, I don't think the downtown area is nearly as bad as some would paint it. But yes, there are lots of opportunities and challenges that we have to meet. And of course, at Explore St. Louis, we've been entrusted with really 3 very important responsibilities. We have to help manage and develop and nurture the brand of St. Louis, not alone, but of course in collaboration with others. But we've also been entrusted with 2 very important public assets, the Dome and the Americas Center. So we have to be all in vested in downtown St. Louis. And I don't believe, Sarah, you can be a great, iconic American city without a great downtown. Now, we've got a lot of great things happening all throughout, particularly in the county, but we have to have a vibrant, robust downtown that's safe, that's clean, that's secure, and that's welcoming. The good news is there's a lot of things happening, and there are literally billions of dollars being invested But part of this is just addressing the needs of downtown and working collaboratively with our partners. At the same time, recognizing that while downtown is undergoing a bit of a renaissance, we have to look at the smaller things, the easier things that don't attract the attention. It's teaching our team to not just say hello, but to smile. It's making sure that we anticipate problems before they happen. It's working with the security facility or security personnel at our facilities with the St. Louis Police Department to make sure that every visitor and resident in downtown feels safe. So a lot of this is just doing what mom taught us to do when we were going to school. Be nice, treat people well, do your work, and let's collaborate and play nice in the sandbox together. Part of it is having a vision of what's possible and not ignoring the problems, but let's not let the problems define us. Let's let the opportunities and the promise and the potential of downtown lead us forward together. I'm certain if we can revive the downtown to what its potential is and continue to grow all throughout that, I think our best days lie before us and not behind us.
It's interesting. There's so many parts of downtown that are doing great, but it feels like the part right around where you're going to be focused, that's one of the parts that's struggling more. What kind of role can Explore St. Louis take in spearheading some of the very specific problems that are on the sidewalks right outside the convention center?
Yeah. First is we have to be curators of the experience. As you say, it's the front porch. And so we have to welcome people to our community, make sure that front porch is presentable and welcoming, which means making sure our visitors feel safe and secure, welcomed and appreciated. Part of that's service and hospitality. Part of that's just recognizing, too, the foot traffic and the footprint of downtown and where people are going. People travel and experience downtown differently today than they did before the pandemic. Part of it is working closely with the business partners down there. As you mentioned, what's interesting and actually fascinating to me about St. Louis downtown is you have pockets of excellence surrounded by mounds of mediocrity. And so when you look at some of the investments, I think of Charlie Downs and the investments he's made. This is a world-class restaurateur who could be investing in restaurants anywhere inside or outside of St. Louis. He is all in on a couple of really cool facilities down there, making sure that we're serving the needs of the restaurants and the retail down there and inviting more. At the same time, working with partners like, the National Historic Blues Museum and making sure that we recognize that when they're having these open mic nights with some extraordinary musicians, that we're accommodating that. So it's really not complicated. It's taking this from a perspective of curating an experience and welcoming people just like you would do if you were bringing them to your home for an event or a party or a dinner. And then at the same time, we have to be really good about marketing downtown in an era where it's not all we want it to be, but it's in a work in progress. And as you mentioned, I think the strength of downtown is the pockets of things going on. I mean, when you look at what's happened at Ballpark Village and you take some of the other development around there, Oliver Properties is making some huge investments. There is a lot happening down there. We just need connection. We need synergy. We need vision. But most importantly, we just need to work together to make sure we're serving the needs of the visitors coming to St. Louis.
So you talk about, sort of needing to bring this all together, all these good things that are happening. There's a lot of people talking about St. Louis's brand and how that is also something that maybe needs a little work, that there's a lot of good things happening, but that's maybe not our public-facing persona. Do you think that is an issue? And is that something that Explore St. Louis hopes to play a role in?
Yeah, I think brand is our biggest challenge besides maybe crime, but it's also our biggest opportunity. Now in crime, we just have to be really good at solving the problems that exist, right? That's just plain and simple. And so my job there is to work with the professionals, law enforcement, which by the way, are some of the finest law enforcement professionals that I've met in my career. So I think if we can't accurately and realistically promote ourselves as a community where you feel safe, we'll never make that progress. Beyond safety and crime, I think the biggest opportunity here is creating and nurturing a well-defined, inclusive, aspirational brand. It's interesting, Sarah, being the time between I was hired and when I started, I had upwards of about 220 conversations with people, some of whom visitors who've visited here, some of whom meeting planners who've come here or who've gone to our competition, businesses that are here or used to be here. And one of the questions I asked them was, what's the brand of St. Louis? I would say 19 times out of 20, they struggle to answer that question. Fascinating to me that people who have lived here struggle to answer that question. But yet St. Louis does have a brand. So I think part of our challenge is we need a well-defined, articulated brand that everyone can align with and see themselves and their business in. And brand isn't a tagline. It's not an ad campaign. We've got to reach that aspirational space where when you hear St. Louis, you feel something positive and you see something that's really compelling for you. We're not there yet, but I think Explore St. Louis plays a role in that, in part by helping shape the narrative of our community, in part by curating the experiences I mentioned before, and in part by finding a way to connect the promise and potential of St. Louis with what the passion of people who are coming here have or want. And when we can connect those dots, I think we can elevate the brand of St. Louis to a higher level than it's ever been before. And by the way, that's not just good for travel and tourism. When we do that, we're helping create a community where people want to live, work, invest, and meet. And that's a virtuous cycle that will benefit everybody. We can't do this alone. We have to work with other partners, Greater St. Louis Inc., for example. We also, you don't need a new guy coming to the community telling you what to do, but I think we have to talk about ourselves a little differently. You know, the most negative comments I've heard about St. Louis have come from residents. And so I think it's okay to be candid and honest and see the challenges and discuss the problems, but let's not define ourselves the way our competition likes to define us. Let's define ourselves by what's really good. I have a simple question for everybody that I ask. If you took a list of all the great things that make it a great place to live here, and then do a second list of all the problems here, tell me which list is longer. I think the first list, the things that are greater, the better, is a lot longer than a problem list. So let's not ignore the problems. Let's focus on them, like safety, but let's also cherish and celebrate and tout the great things about St. Louis. And if we do that, that will lift our brand to new heights.
Interesting, you saying that the worst things you've heard are coming from people here. Does that point to a bigger problem, that people here are onto something that's just not working, that St. Louis is in some way broken? What makes you think that this is more of a, we need to learn to talk better about ourselves versus we need to fix something at our core?
Yeah. Well, and let's be clear, it's not just about perception. I mean, there are some real challenges in St. Louis. We don't help ourselves by burying our head in the sand. But you know, it's interesting, in those conversations I've had, I don't sense that those negative comments come from a place of anger or hatred. It's more disappointment, because I think the residents who live here, particularly those who've lived here most or all of their lives, they know what's possible and they see what the potential is. And maybe they're a little frustrated and disappointed because we haven't tapped into that. Hey, I get that. We all have that in our lives at some point in time. My only point is, let's not focus on the negatives. Let's address the negatives, but let's tout the positives. Coming from the outside, and again, I've lived in some great communities and I had the opportunity to go to some major cities. I chose St. Louis because I think this is a special place, not only to visit, to meet, but a great place to live, to invest, and to work. And I think if we take that attitude in and not ignore the problems, in fact, let's try to solve the problems, but let's also talk about what's really good and what's appealing about this community. A lot of times visitors and especially meeting planners pay attention to what locals say about the community because they want to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just got to make sure that we're telling the good along with the rest of that story.
So in our last couple minutes here, I want to end on something a little more personal. You're from the Midwest, you said. What part?
I grew up in the middle of nowhere. We were surrounded by cornfields all around me, just about 4 hours of here in East Central Illinois.
East Central Illinois. Okay. So that could be any number of one of these tiny little...
It was Nowheresville, but just close enough to St. Louis that I grew up with an appreciation for this. And then after that, I moved out east. So I spent most of my adult life on the East Coast and the Caribbean.
And I understand that you actually got into the industry after you were managing a Hard Rock Cafe. And I feel like anybody who's worked in the restaurant business, you just learn these lessons that you take with you your entire life. Do you still find yourself sort of hearkening back to what you learned as a restaurant manager?
I did. Well, and the interesting thing, I came from corporate finance. And the true story, I'd love to tell you that I was this brilliant mastermind restaurateur. The fact is, nobody in the company wanted to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So they sent me to open up what they thought was going to be a seasonal cafe. It turned out to be a $23 million restaurant, second most profitable in the company at that time. And I found myself at 26 years old. I'd never waited tables, never worked in a kitchen. Suddenly, I'm managing 250 employees in this massive restaurant designed as an Egyptian pyramid of all things. But I learned a few things about this. Number one, I learned the art of service, because you can be the best restaurant manager in the world, but if you don't take care of those kitchen cooks that are preparing the food and the waiters and waitresses that are serving the guests, nothing matters. Secondly, I recognize that not everybody's happy, but you can kill them with kindness. So I got, an opportunity about 3,000 times every day to make somebody's day a little better. I don't know if we changed lives, but we certainly made people happy. And that was our goal. Just make them a little happier and give them a reason to come back. The third thing I recognize, and this is what really defined my career going forward, is that I went to that job thinking that I was managing 250 jobs. What I realized is those jobs weren't just jobs. In some cases, they were careers, but in all cases, they were putting food on the table, paying for college tuition and car payments and mortgage payments. We were helping people make a difference in the community just by being good at what we did within our four walls. And then when I realized that there's a lot of other businesses trying to push that boulder up the same hill, I got involved in the community and eventually got on the board of the local destination marketing organization. And here I am, 25 years later, leading another destination marketing organization. I look back and realize that training in hospitality gave me a unique opportunity to interact with people at all levels of society and understand the importance of travel and tourism, not just as a tool to fill restaurants and hotels, but as a transformative force of good that can not only be great for the economy, but tourism can be a first date for economic development and commercial investment, because oftentimes companies, they visit hotels and restaurants and taxi cabs and Ubers before they invest in your community. So it gave me an appreciation for what's possible at an organization like Explore St. Louis. So imagine a couple decades later how excited I am to come back to a community that I once visited as a child, a community that has really excelled in travel and tourism, but I think one that has even greater potential than we've tapped up to now.
Well, Brad Dean, President and CEO of Explore St. Louis, also new St. Louis resident, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
In just a minute, St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Kroll joins us for The Kicker. He'll get us up to speed with the latest on the St. Louis mayor's race. Is it over, or can Mayor Tishaura Jones battle back after a disappointing first-round finish? This episode of the 314 podcast is supported by Stages St. Louis. Experience the magic of live theater with Stages St. Louis. The 2025 season brings you 3 incredible shows. From the thrilling mystery of Murder for Two to the enchanting pre-Broadway production of Austin's Pride and the inspiring sounds of Beautiful, the Carole King musical, there's something for everyone. Subscribe today and see all 3 shows for one low price. Secure your seats now at stagesstlouis.org. And now for The Kicker. Just over a week ago, St. Louis Mayor Tishaura Jones suffered a resounding loss in the mayoral primary. But because of St. Louis's unique approval voting system, the race isn't over yet. Or is it? Jones is set for a rematch with the 2021 runner-up, Alderwoman Cara Spencer. Spencer won approval from 68% of voters, compared to just 33% for Jones. And St. Louis Magazine staff writer Ryan Kroll is here to tell us why and what happens next. Ryan, welcome.
Hey, Sarah. Good to be here.
So, Ryan, 2 big factors here. Turnout was incredibly low on the north side. That's Mayor Jones's home and political base. But second is that Cara Spencer flipped some progressive Southeast city wards that had previously gone for Jones. What's your take on why for those 2 factors?
I think 2 things. One is I think the mayor was a little bit of a victim of circumstance here. There was the snowstorm in early January that the city really bungled the response to. There's just this general sort of like anti-incumbency fervor.
Throw the bums out.
Exactly. But at the same time, I think a big issue, a kind of issue, is that Jones she ran 4 years ago as a progressive, but she sort of governed as a moderate. And I think maybe progressives are kind of turned off by the way that she governed. And then maybe more moderates remember her image or the way she sort of sold herself 4 years ago as a progressive, sort of leaving no one happy. And then that was just an intrinsic advantage for someone who's been in politics for a while, but is still more of a blank slate than the sitting mayor.
And that is Kara Spencer.
Exactly.
I think she kind of effectively portrayed herself as I'm somebody who cares about getting back to basics. I think we heard Mayor Jones talk a lot about transformational and we want to do these big projects. You don't really hear Kara Spencer talking much about that.
Yeah, one of her supporters actually put it really well, I thought. She said that that Kara does a really good job kind of marrying the pragmatic with the progressive. So, well, easier said than done, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, so she certainly did really well in the primary. Now they run head to head. Should we count Mayor Jones out?
Never say never, but it's going to take a lot. Like, unless it turns out Alderwoman Spencer's, palling around with Stan Kroenke or something like that. Yeah.
The kiss of death.
Yeah. You never say never, but it's gonna be tough for the mayor to make up the big deficit from last week.
So there were two other candidates in the primary, and both of them, like Mayor Jones, are African-American candidates. Do you think Jones can count on picking off votes that previously went to Andrew Jones or to Mike Butler?
Well, Andrew Jones, the Republican, I can't imagine too many people who cast a ballot for him are going to go and vote for the mayor in April. And then just back of the envelope, if everyone who voted for Michael Butler, who cast a ballot for Michael Butler, even the people who voted for Michael Butler and Kara Spencer, if they all voted for Tishaura Jones in April,
only Tishaura
Jones in April, she'd still be several thousand votes short.
Okay, so even that would not be enough.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of the focus here for both her and Spencer is going to be on turnout. Spencer needs to make sure she doesn't lose that momentum, that her people don't just stay home because they think it's over. Jones is going to try to get a bunch more people out. You don't seem to think she can flip this.
Yeah, I think she's got I think the mayor, she would have to, voter turnout's going to increase in April, no doubt. But the sort of ratio by which the mayor would have to win those sort of new voters, whatever you want to call them, is just huge, and I don't think it's possible. And also, too, the idea that like you have sort of inertia among your voting base, that usually manifests itself in the primary, not in the general. So I don't think Alderwoman Spencer should be too worried about, her supporters thinking that this one's in the bag.
So her voters are going to turn out. You feel confident of that.
Yeah.
So what for Mayor Jones? It's you kind of feel like this might be the end of the road for her.
I think it might be, and I don't know. Part of me thinks that she's done a lot that's just great. I think a lot of stuff with infrastructure and that kind of thing. I think a lot of her biggest wins are things that are just not immediately obvious.
That will pay off down the road.
Exactly.
You mean?
Yeah, exactly. So if in like 10 years, if St. Louis is more sort of like on the Atlanta path than like the Youngstown path, I think Tishaura Jones is going to have like a great legacy and be really well regarded. And if she wants to kind of bolster that, what I think is going to be a great legacy, maybe she should just say, look, for the next 4 weeks, I'm just going to do whatever I can to set the Spencer administration up for success. Just, she herself is on the record saying that with the approval voting, if there's a blowout in the primary, maybe just don't have the general. So I could see sort of her taking a kind of magnanimous route, save herself having to kind of go on debates and what's seemingly kind of looking to be like a, just an insurmountable sort of task she has ahead of her, and just say, I'm going to do whatever I can to make it a smooth transition, set the next administration up for success. I think that would bolster her legacy quite a bit.
Do you think there's any chance that could happen?
Oh, no, there's not a chance.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
This is just you, Ryan Kroll, are thinking what you might do if you were Tishaura Jones.
Yeah, and also too, if I was the mayor, would I do that? Not a chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying if she wants to be bigger than this moment, here's something she could do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there does seem to be some personal animosity between these two candidates. I think you're right. We're not going to see that happen. And this is kind of tricky because, as you've reported, there is this incredibly short turnaround.
Yeah.
Between the general election and when the new mayor gets sworn in. And this is kind of interesting. It's due to an accident of the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So this is under the city's charter. The election is on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in April. This year, it's as late as it could possibly be. It's happening on April 8th. The mayor has to start the new term on the third Tuesday. So normally you could get as much as like almost 2 weeks. Now you're getting like 7 days. Is this on Alderwoman Kara Spencer's mind at this point?
I think it most definitely is. And I think she's got to be thinking about campaigning, obviously, but at the same time thinking about who's going to be in her transition team, who she is going to appoint to these important cabinet positions, that kind of thing. With her, though, I don't think she can really talk about that publicly, because then it looks like the whole thing's kind of she's sort of disrespecting the process. I don't think she wants to do that. So she's going to have to kind of have this sort of public face, campaigning, getting out the vote, that kind of thing, and then privately trying to get all of her personnel in order, because it is, just 1 week before someone wins and then the new administration takes over. So then again, hey, maybe that's maybe another reason to for the incumbent to
extend the olive branch.
Extend the olive branch. Yeah, exactly.
Well, one can hope. Boy, there's going to be just a lot of news to cover. Ryan Kroll, you always keep us informed. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to do it.
And that was Ryan Kroll, staff writer at St. Louis Magazine, and that was The Kicker. I'm Sarah Fenske. That's the 314 for today. You can find out more in our podcast show notes and at stlmag.com. You can also find me and Ryan every day in your inbox. That's thanks to St. Louis Magazine's fantastic free newsletter, St. Louis Daily. It's a fresh take on St. Louis with insight and original reporting. Sign up at stlmag.com/newsletters. The 314 is a production of St. Louis Magazine. I'm Sarah Fenske, and this is The 314. See you next time.